my research over the years and with my career, I'm always, I suppose, my mission is to empower others through the medium of sport and physical activity as well. So I hope you take something from my talk. It'll be about a half an hour, and then after Sharon, you'll get a chance to ask any questions, and I'd be happy to answer any questions. So the focus of the talk is promoting physical activity in the early years. So we're going to look at physical activity and strategies to, I suppose, enhance inclusivity and well-being amongst children in the early years. So just to give you a bit of a background before I kind of delve into the content, I suppose just because it's focused on physical activity and sport in the early years, I have a strong background in sport, and it's always been a massive part of my life. And I think it's really inspired me to go on with my career and to now educate in sport education and in physical activity. And I suppose GAA really and athletics are my main sports. And I was lucky enough over the years to play with the Cork senior ladies footballers. So for 13 years, recently retired last year, 13-year career with the Cork ladies footballers, and also with my club Middleton. So I'm from Middleton in County Cork, and athletics also is a big passion of mine. So I suppose as I said, my career is kind of really has been inspired from on the pitch or on the field, and that led me then to, I suppose, go down the route of sport education. So my undergrad degree was in UCC, and I did sports studies and physical education. So I'm a qualified PE teacher. And then I went on to do a PhD in UCC also in the Department of Sports Studies. And my PhD looked specifically at female youth sport participation. I suppose looking at the motivators, why girls are playing sport and why they're physically active, the barriers and solutions and practical strategies to try and get more girls to stay involved in sport and physical activity and to combat that big dropout rate. So that led me on to the PhD. And since the PhD, which I completed in 2021, I've been lecturing with Dundalk IT in the early years sector. So I lecture on physical activity modules, research-based modules, and I've also was working in DCU in the primary school teaching department, looking at physical activity specific modules as well. So just to give you a bit of a background in terms of my sport, my research, and also most recently I have set up my own business, and it's a service-based business whereby I deliver workshops and I suppose coaching sessions targeting teachers and coaches and players and children through camps, through workshops, through talks and seminars and coaching clinics. So I'm heavily involved with the Ladies Gaelic Football Association, although I'm retired now. I've switched my role to the more coaching role now. And this is just a love of mine and a passion of mine. And I'm very grateful for the opportunity to, I suppose, speak tonight and hopefully inspire you, and hopefully that you'll deem physical activity and sport important to the lives of children, because when you look at physical inactivity, unfortunately, I think it's like the 5th cause of death worldwide at the moment. Like over 3 million people a year are dying worldwide of physical inactivity. So it's so important from a young age to, I suppose, develop those, positive attitudes towards physical activities. So it's a lifelong learning experience, and that children can bring that with them into adulthood as well. So I suppose really the focus of the webinar, I'm just going to touch off 2 areas. So the first area is just, I suppose, looking at physical activity. What actually is physical activity? What are the guidelines? What are the actual current physical activity levels from an Irish research perspective? And also looking at the concept of fundamental movement skills, which go hand in hand with physical activity. And then I'm going to just take you through some practical strategies from an educational point of view, as an educator, as a practitioner. Okay, I now understand the importance of physical activity and fundamental movement skills, but how can I implement that? And how can I now bring that into an educational setting so that I can, implement physical activity and allow the children to reap the benefits of physical activity as well. So obviously the focus of this webinar is preschool age children and primary school age children. And I'm just going to give you a flavour really of these two focus areas for the next 25 minutes or so. So I suppose the first part is just understanding physical activity and fundamental movement skills. So what is physical activity? Physical activity is any bodily movement produced by skeletal muscles that require energy expenditure. So that's the definition. But I suppose in layman terms, in basic terms, it's any movement that you're doing that it causes your heart rate to increase, essentially. So from, I suppose, a child, an infant, toddler, child perspective, you're looking at any bodily movement. So you're looking at walking, crawling, reaching, grasping, tumbling, squatting, pushing, pulling, anything that's requiring the body to use energy expenditure. From a child and or adult perspective, you're looking at things like walking, maybe walking up and down the stairs, doing some housework in the kitchen at home, and also sport is a form of physical activity as well. And I think sometimes we get a bit confused with, sometimes we categorize sport as separate to physical activity, and actually sport is just a category of physical activity. So it's not just sport. You can be involved in sport and that's great too, but I suppose really it's any bodily movement. Do you decide to take the stairs or do you decide to take the lift? Do you walk to school? Do you walk to your car? Do you walk, do you do the housework, etc.? So it's any bodily movement essentially that's requiring you to get a bit out of breath. Now, obviously there are different levels of physical activity. So there's kind of moderate to vigorous levels. So the moderate levels would include things like walking, maybe the housework, and then you're going up the scale to the vigorous physical activity whereby you're going to be out of breath. So things like maybe walking up and down a few floors of stairs. Maybe it's a fast, brisk walk or a jog or any form of sport or kind of manual labor that you're going to be kind of sweating almost and out of breath. So it's just important, I guess, from an educational point of view, to look at what actually is physical activity first and foremost. So that's the definition of physical activity. Now, I'm not going to go through all the different benefits because, we all know ourselves that there's an array of health benefits associated with physical activity. So we have physical benefits such as, for your heart health, your weight, you have obviously your metabolic health, it strengthens your bones, muscular fitness, so you become stronger. So we have all of that, but we also have the cognitive side of things. So, it's stimulating new neurons in your brain. It's helping you to focus, attention span, concentration. It's releasing tension. It's releasing stress. You have the hormones. You have the endorphins. It's enhancing the feel-good hormones. And also it's affecting things like academic performance, memory, attention, all that. So there's ample, benefits when it comes to physical activity. From a child's perspective also, we look at the psychosocial elements. So we look at things like building confidence, improving social skills, improving sleep. You can all resonate, I'm sure, when you perform physical activity or when you go out for a walk or you come back from the gym or you come back from walking your dog, that you can resonate with some of these benefits. And it's important to understand and appreciate the benefits and encourage the children, in our settings, no matter what age, that these are the benefits and that, you will reap these benefits if you develop that healthy attitude towards physical activity as well. So you can see just the different, I'm not going to read them out now, but just, I suppose, if anything, to highlight that it's not just that it's good physically for your health, like emotionally, socially, it's good for your health. You're meeting new people. You're learning other life skills also. When it comes to maybe sport, for example, you're learning, things like discipline, things like taking turns, things like winning, losing, resilience, persistence, timing, decision making. You're learning so much, and it's just, as I said, it's really, really important to be aware and to highlight these, whether it be to parents, whether it be to other staff members. If you're a prospective educator and you're not fully qualified yet, that you yourself are aware of the benefits and you appreciate the benefits, because you're the role model essentially, when it comes to promotion of physical activity in your setting. Just to highlight those benefits, I suppose when it comes to recommendations, so how much physical activity should we be getting every day? And the World Health Organization advocates that children and young people aged 2 to 18 should be doing at least 60 minutes of moderate to vigorous physical activity every day. So I mentioned a while ago about moderate to vigorous physical activity. So different levels. That's, I suppose, you're going to get your heart rate going, and it's in bouts. And I think that's the important thing, that we don't necessarily have to just go out for 1 hour and walk the dog, or just go and play sport for that 1 hour, or just do housework for 1 hour in order to meet these guidelines. It's incrementally, and it can be in bouts throughout the day. So it could be 10 minutes of a walk to school in the morning or to work. It could be, how many times are you walking up and down the stairs or walking around school every day, or around the yard, inside or outside. It's, the housework. It's incremental during the day. And I think that's key when it comes to the guidelines. So what the World Health Organization, I suppose, promote also is that it includes muscle strengthening, flexibility, and bone strengthening exercises 3 times a week also. Now, that doesn't mean that you're encouraging, a 5-year-old to be going to the gym or anything like that. That's not what it's meant. It's meant by, I suppose, things like, let's just say, from 3 or 4-year-olds perspective in a preschool setting or in a creche or in a Montessori, that they're getting that opportunity to maybe push objects or toys, or maybe that they're just bending down and they're using their own body weight to squat and pick up something, or they're pushing maybe something, or they're maybe on a bike and they're using their own strength. So it doesn't necessarily mean that it has to be like physically with a weight, or this big heavy thing in their hand, or that they're pushing, pulling, but that it's included in those guidelines too. So that's children and young people aged 2 to 18. So when you break it down, I suppose, a bit more, when we look at kind of the trajectory from, baby to kind of, I suppose, going into primary school age years, this is what the World Health Organization advocates, is that, I suppose, babies, infants under the age of 1 year should be getting at least 30 minutes in terms of floor-based activities. So things like tummy time, and again, it's spread throughout the day. It's interactive floor-based play. So things like using objects that they're kind of either, crawling to reach things, or just as a young baby, a few months old, that they have that tummy time as well. And that's spread throughout the day. So it's not a case that you're, putting a baby down on the ground for 30 minutes. It's spread throughout the day as well. But it is important that we are meeting these physical activity guidelines. These are global guidelines, from the World Health Organization. So when we look at ages 1 to 2, where the WHO, the World Health Organization, propose 180 minutes. So again, not to be restrained for more than 60 minutes at a time. So I suppose when you're 1 to 2 years, you're more than likely going to be walking, and you're going to be, exploring things and objects, and you're going to be using more of your body weight. So naturally, you're going to be more active as a 1 to 2-year-old. So again, just keeping in mind, that they are physically active as much as possible throughout the day. Similarly, ages 3 to 4 propose 180 minutes. At least 60 minutes of that 180 minutes should be moderate to vigorous intensity level. So I suppose the older you're getting now, again, you're going to be more active, going to be, on your toes, maybe chasing around, playing a few more games, understanding maybe more kind of rule-based games and activities, and on your feet a bit more. So again, you want the 3 to 4-year-olds to get out of breath slightly, and that they're it's moderate to vigorous intensity level. And again, not restrained for more than 60 minutes in bouts throughout the day, because naturally 3 to 4-year-olds are going to be probably more active than adults anyway, definitely at that age. So just to be mindful of the different recommendations. So I suppose, yeah, we know what physical activity is. We understand the importance of physical activity, and we now are aware of the recommendations as per age group, from a baby all the way up to 18 years of age. We're aware of the different guidelines that the World Health Organization propose. So that's all well and good, but are Irish, for example, here, what is the percentage of Irish primary school age children? Are they meeting the guidelines? So what do you think? What percentage? Think about it, have a little think. Perhaps maybe if you want to just jot down, have a little guess. If you want to jot down in the chat function, just have a little guess. Yeah, just give me a figure. Just jot away down. Give me a percentage. So what percentage of Irish primary school age children are meeting the physical activity guidelines? Now remember, primary school age children are 60 minutes of moderate to vigorous physical activity a day. So I'll just give you a minute just to jot down. So I'm seeing kind of different figures coming through here, 30%, 15%, it's varying, 35%, 25%, 40%. So there's a big variety there. Yeah, 50%. Okay. I'm going to come back here. So the answer, right, and you'll be quite shocked. So thank you for having a guess. But a recent study, the Children's Sport Participation and Physical Activity Study that was completed in 2022. Now this is the biggest national study that is conducted from an Irish perspective of children, so primary school and post-primary school age children. So in 2022, they released their reports and their findings. And in this study, this is including 8,500 participants from about 153 schools in the Republic of Ireland and in Northern Ireland. So this is a big scale study, and it's very representative of the whole of Ireland, because these schools are inclusive of everywhere in Ireland, essentially. So what they found was that only 23% of primary school age children are meeting these guidelines. So that's actually frightening to a certain extent, because 60 minutes isn't really that much when you consider that it can be broken into bouts throughout the day, particularly children that are maybe walking around in school. Are they playing sport? Are they physically active? 23% were reported to be physically active, which is a frightening statistic, and it would make you think, is there enough education? For example, in primary school education, I know in some colleges, physical activity and physical education can be an elective. Not all, teachers that are coming out of colleges are fully competent and confident in teaching physical education. It's not, is it regulated enough in Ireland? These are kind of questions to ponder, and perhaps maybe that has a link to why such, few Irish primary school age children are meeting these 60 minutes. You've things like technology, where they're all on their screens. You've this concept like surplus safety, where I suppose some schools and some settings don't allow physical activity because of insurance purposes. I suppose there are a lot of barriers in the way too, which we can appreciate. The weather could be one, things like that. But it's still not really good enough that only 23% of Irish primary school age children are actually meeting the guideline. It's quite worrying. However, since 2018. So this study was done in 2018, and then they repeated it, the same study in 2022. So the number of children have actually increased in terms of meeting the guidelines. So you can see here on the graph that in 2018, only 17% were meeting the guidelines, whereas now 23. It's not much of an improvement, but it is an improvement. And I suppose just on another note, I know it's not very relevant to this webinar, this topic area, but the post-primary school also increased slightly by 2%. So although it's still quite low, I suppose, you know, Rome wasn't built in a day. We have to appreciate the positive findings too, that look, there are increases in physical activity participation since 2018 too, which is promising for the future. However, there were significantly lower rates of sport participation among students with disabilities compared to those without. So, you know, that was a key finding also in the 2022 most recent CISPA study. So, you know, that's food for thought as well, in terms of educational structures. Is there enough there in settings, in terms of inclusivity as well? So just, I suppose, to keep in mind these statistics. More boys than girls were reported meeting the guidelines too. Now this is, I suppose, this is something that it's a pattern that we've seen over the last few years. This is something that I've researched myself, specifically with girls, and unfortunately less girls are physically active than boys. And we see a higher dropout rate for girls too, kind of coming into pre-adolescence. So maybe that transition from sixth class into first year in secondary school, we're seeing that dropout rate, unfortunately, and it's much higher for girls than boys too. So look, it is getting better, but there are still differences there between boys and girls as well, just to make you aware of that. So I suppose something that is very linked to physical activity, and it falls under the domain of physical activity, is that of fundamental movement skills. So what are fundamental movement skills? So I'm sure some of you have heard this concept kind of thrown around now and then, but they're so important. And what they are their basic patterns of movement that involve different body parts, and they provide the overall basis of physical literacy and physical activity. So what do I mean by movement patterns? I mean 3 categories: locomotor skills, stability skills, and object control or manipulative skills. So you can see from the list there the different skills that are involved in fundamental movement skills. And these are skills that we take for granted. We just assume that children can perform these basic skills. You know, we think, you know, they're probably used to kicking a ball at home, or they're used to running around their back garden, or, you know, in the park. We just assume sometimes, and assumptions is dangerous territory, because these skills have to be learned and they have to be taught. And I think as educators, sometimes we're not aware of that these skills actually need to be practiced and executed in order to become better and to become confident and competent in performing these skills. So what the research is saying is that these are the building blocks for things like sport movements, and also lifelong physical activity. So in other words, what the research has found is that there's a direct positive correlation between fundamental movement skills and staying involved in physical activity and having an appreciation for physical activity and for sport. So this whole concept of like physical literacy, in other words, what the research has found is that if children from a young age particularly are competent at performing these basic skills such as running, skipping, hopping, jumping, striking, that's going to directly affect their confidence levels, which will affect their internal motivation to want to do the task or to take part in the activity again. And when they're competent in these fundamental motor skills or movement skills, then it's like a cycle. You know, they'll be fit, they'll develop good attitudes towards physical activity and sport down the line, and that link is there to lifelong physical activity. So that's why it's so important to, from that age, like particularly in, I would argue, the first 7 years, I would argue that preschool age children, it's probably most important to develop those healthy habits and healthy attitude, and allow the children to actually execute those skills and practice those skills. Don't just assume and take for granted that these children, even in primary school level, even at secondary school level, I even see it as a PE teacher, as a physical education teacher at post-primary school. It's madness observing some of the kids, and I'm like, some of them can't even run properly or get the contralateral movement of opposite hand and opposite foot, balancing a ball, catching a ball. The fear element is there, lack of confidence in their skill. And it's almost too late, I would argue, by the time they get to secondary school. So that's why it's so important to highlight the benefits and highlight what actually are fundamental movement skills so that they can be executed and practiced and actually affect children long term so that they develop that physical literacy journey, that it's not just sure, we'll just play a bit of ball there now, or we'll just play duck duck goose. Like, there's more to it than that. It's the emotional side, it's the life skills, it's the physical literacy. So keep that in mind, that whole competence and the motivation, because I suppose giving them those opportunities and having that culture of healthy physical activity in the setting, that will affect their internal motivation. And that's what you want. You don't want to be forcing them, in primary school and secondary school to be going to training session or to be taking part in the PE class. You want that to come internally, whereby they can make the decision and they actually want to take part and they enjoy it as well. But just to keep in mind that too. And also just to highlight a recent Irish study, Moving Well, Being Well, in DCU, was conducted amongst primary school age children. Over 2,000 children, both male and female, were part of this study. And shockingly, 77.5% of children scored between very poor and below average in fundamental movement skill proficiency. So what that means is that all of those basic skills that I outlined, like running, skipping, hopping, jumping, balancing, kicking, catching, all of these basic skills were assessed, and 77%, 78 essentially percent of the children could not perform these skills and execute these skills. Like, that's frightening. That is actually frightening when you think about it. And look, there are barriers that can get in the way. I know when I was younger, I used to be climbing trees and I used to be, jumping up on the grass and coming in with cuts on my knee and stuff. That's not really happening as much now because of advances in technology, and, maybe we're kind of promoting that surplus safety environment where, like, it's almost like, oh, just they can't now do this because it's unsafe and they'll fall and they'll get injured and insurance won't cover if someone falls in the yard. And it's very much kind of going against, I suppose, execution of physical activity. And sometimes when the children are in your setting, whether it be preschool or primary school, that could be the only time that they're executing these skills and that they have an opportunity to execute these skills. So I suppose as an educator, it's up to you, and you play a massive role, whether you're looking at the preschool age cohort or primary school age cohort. It's your job essentially. You're the role model, you're the educator, and it's up to you to create that opportunity whereby the children have that opportunity to practice these skills, because it links to lifelong physical activity, and that's the most important thing. And you want to give them that positive outlook from an early age so that they can develop those habits. So I suppose really, like, looking at physical activity, I'm not going to ask you to comment here. I just want you to think just for 10, 15 seconds here now. Have a think about the children that you're involved with in your setting. How physically active are they? Do you allocate time, or is it unstructured time? Or is there some structured time there in your own setting? And within that time, how much time? Is it 10 minutes? Is it kind of broken up into different bouts throughout the day? Or do you actually have set time for physical activity, whether it be physical education or physical activity in your setting? And I suppose, do you see those benefits also? That's the most important thing. Like, are the children in your setting reaping the benefits of physical activity? If your answers to these questions are quite negative, then essentially it's up to you as the educator to do something about that. And if If they're quite positive, your answers to these questions, then continue to encourage physical activity and fundamental movement skills in your setting as well. There's always room for improvement there in terms of the skill level and attitude and the fun element within the setting. So just be mindful of those three kind of questions when it comes to your own setting also. Sorry, I'm flying through the slides, but I'm just conscious of time. And really, tonight is just giving you a flavour. We're not going to go into detail, like in terms of exact like activities that we're going to be doing, but I'm just going to touch off, give you some ideas in terms of, okay, I understand that physical activity and fundamental movement skills are very, very important for children and the benefits. But how can I now take that information and how can I make that practical in the environment, but also make it inclusive so that you're meeting the needs of all children, and that you can make it adaptive to their needs so that their needs are met, and essentially creating that culture of promoting physical activity in the settings too. So just to make reference that, Ashtar, the early childhood curriculum, physical activity falls under the theme of well-being here. So it is your role to promote it as much as you can every day in the setting. In terms of infants, we look at, I suppose, kind of babies, up to 1, maybe 2 years. The most important thing here is just things like floor-based activities and just, I suppose, guided physical activity whereby, maybe they're not walking yet, maybe they're just about to walk. So things like, tummy time, when nappy changing, that you're allowing the babies to kick their legs, to move around, to reach for things, to hold on to objects in, the house or in the setting, and helping them. You're facilitating them and you're guiding them so that they're getting as much of an opportunity as possible throughout the day. Because as I was saying, when they go home, it could be straight to bed. They may not be getting the opportunity in a home environment. That's why it's so important to promote it. From toddlers' perspective, I suppose they're kind of 1, 2, they're kind of getting a bit older. They're exploring things, so interactive play with maybe like a football or an object, encouraging the children to kind of squat down, things like head, shoulders, knees and toes, introducing sports equipment, footballs and things like that, using toys and cycling, swimming, things like that. Very, very beneficial for toddlers. Moving on to kind of 2 to 3 years, then you're kind of looking at, I suppose, kids are a bit more active, things like duck, duck, goose, more chasing games, obstacle courses, maybe more sport specific kind of skills like striking, kicking, catching, balancing, ringer, ringer, rosy, like the list goes on. There are numerous resources out there, on YouTube, on Google, like it's not as if you have to come up with your own things and reinvent the wheel. They're all there for you. And I'm sure you're familiar with the things that work in your setting. Don't be afraid to try new things in your setting. Another way, I suppose, for the older groups as well is storytelling, to integrate physical activity with storytelling and allow the children to kind of, I suppose, act out the characters in terms of physical activity, things like follow the leader, emulating the movements of a teacher or child-led activities as well. And obviously, improving the skill level and improving the challenge of the activity as well. Risky play then also is important in terms of building resilience. Obviously gradually, you don't want to just go straight in and building up the confidence and competence of the children as well. So don't leave that out in terms of physical activity in the setting too. Animal yoga is another one that works really, really well and helps promote the mindfulness and the emotional well-being also there, which is important. That doesn't always have to be energetic physical activity. It can actually be quite relaxing too, any form of movement, and when it's affecting, I suppose, mindfulness too, it can be quite effective. There's just a list there of some useful equipment. I like to use things like noodles for primary school age children and preschool age children. Very, very you can do loads with noodles and like things like parachutes, hula hoops also. I'm a big fan of hula hoops, skipping ropes, things like that. That they're novel activities as well, that you're not just using the same equipment all of the time, that you're mixing it up for them so that they're constantly being challenged and their motivation levels and attention levels are are keeping up to par, that it's not boring essentially, because you need to keep it fun and interactive as well. And I think that's the key word really, is fun, particularly when it comes to kind of the older age groups, when, you know, it can get a bit more competitive. You don't want to be too competitive. You want maximum participation. So are your physical education sessions, are your physical activity sessions maximized in terms of, are they actually enjoying themselves? Because if they're not enjoying themselves, you need to question why they're not enjoying themselves. And that's what you want. You want to create that fun, feel good atmosphere. And that can be done also through the, obviously the primary school curriculum, where the 7 strands of physical activity. So you've obviously athletics, dance, games, gymnastics, aquatics, and outdoor adventure. So, you know, you have a curriculum there, and it's your job as an educator to execute the different skills associated with these 7 strands too. And I think just from, I suppose, a reminder while you're actually delivering a physical activity session, that you have a bit of a structure there. You know, that it's not just this purpose behind it. You don't just kind of, what will we do today? That you actually plan and you have a bit of a structure there. And then I like to kind of say that the 3 Fs, it has to be fun, you know, it has to involve that friendship and that social element and the fundamental movement skills. Are you allowing that time for them to practice the skills in your sessions? Obviously, promote encouragement. Children need that validation, they need that praise, they need that encouragement in order to, you know, affect their motivation levels as well. I mean, feedback as well, you know, you can correct them, but as much as possible when they're young, it's encouragement. Inclusion is key too, in terms of, you know, meeting everybody's needs. And in order to do that, you know, you have to adapt. You're going to have different needs in amongst the children in your setting. You need to get to know their needs and you need to meet all their needs. And that can be quite hard, but there's ways around it. Adaptation through equipment. You might need to use a bigger ball. You might need to allow for more time for some students or some children to perform the activity. You may have to change the rules. You may have to change your language around it. You may have to include more visuals depending on their needs, etc. Just to keep that in mind too. And I suppose also just promote that healthy competition, whereby you're not just focusing on the end result, that it's a process and it's not just about winning, because they can lose interest if it's just about winning, and that can affect their motivation levels as well. I suppose just to finish up, something that I've come across in my own research and from an Irish perspective summarized is, you know, we have to remember when we're planning our physical activity sessions, why are our children participating? And these are the main reasons from an Irish perspective over the last 10 years reported. So just take note, like fun is number one. So are you making your sessions fun? Are you allowing that time for them to compete and get better in terms of skill and have that social interaction? So just to be mindful of the whys. Why are they quitting? Why are they dropping out? This is at an older level now, primary school age, going into secondary school. The fun is gone. Teacher is too strict, too competitive, negative influence, you know, other commitments, etc. So just be mindful of the why they're involved, and why they're stopping, and why they're lacking interest and lacking focus. And that will help you in terms of planning your sessions, because as I was saying, you are in control. You're the educator, and essentially it is your role to perform physical activity and to allow that opportunity within your setting. And you're the role model. You know, you may be the only form of encouragement. You know, some of the children's parents may not deem sport or physical activity as important. So it's up to you as an educator to promote that positive physical activity environment and culture within your setting. And that can go a long way. Never underestimate the difference that you can make in the lives of children in particular. So thank you. I know I flew through the slides there, but I'm just conscious of the time. If you have any questions, the questions will be after the next presentation. So I'd be happy to answer those questions at the end of the webinar series. So thank you for your time. And my email address is there, and the slides will be shared with you after the webinar. So the slides can be emailed to you if needs be, if you want to go back on some of the information on the slides also. So Gaurav Mila Mahagwith, and I'm happy to take questions at the end. I think you're just muted there, Margarita. Yeah, you're just muted.
Oh, so I'm talking away to myself. Sure, nothing new there. Thank you very much, Orla. That was very interesting. I was just saying to myself, rather than to everybody else, that the session will be shared on YouTube. I see a couple of people saying there, will they be able to sort of see it again? So it can, the slides will be available on it. We can attach them to the certificates when they're sent out. And we also will have a lovely little ebook to accompany that as well. So we'll send all that out to you afterwards. And just now, the next speaker that we have is Sharon McCready, and I think that Sharon is ready to roll. Sharon, are you there?
Can you hear me okay, Marguerite?
Can indeed, Sharon. Very welcome.
Okay, thanks very much. Just following on Orla there, thank you very much, Orla. That was actually very, very interesting. My own background, a little bit just about myself. I grew up in the countryside, very, very active, the eldest of 11 children, always, all of us involved in sports. My dad had a saying that if we were all involved in sport and physical activity, that we couldn't go too far wrong, and he was right. My sister played hockey, I played tennis for Ireland, and we got involved very, very young in sport, and there was a tennis club close to us, and as kids that was where all of our activity happened every day. We'd just head off and it would be just fantastic. And so being young and being physically active definitely translated all through my life. And even with my own children now, they're all very actively involved in sport. And so when I moved out of corporate and business world and transitioned into early years, it was just a natural progression for me to actually make sure that, the activities we provided in the preschool that I run, were catering to all of the children's needs and meeting all of their needs, and that it was inclusive and that they all felt involved. But, there's a huge, huge emphasis in our Montessori on being physically active. So we'll move on to the next slide there, Katrina. I can't see my slides, by the way, because I've had a bit of a technical hitch. So I'll click them here myself, and maybe I'll be able to see them. Anyway, I'm not sure what you're seeing, but if we're on slide 2, it's just about the philosophy that we have ourselves here in the Montessori. It's about encompassing very strong beliefs and values regarding the role of physical activities, which all the research basically it all says that this promotes healthy physical children. They're physically healthy. It helps them to develop their cognitive skills, their social skills, communication, their emotional well-being, their self-esteem and their confidence, helps them to build resilience. It also helps with, even things like behavioral regulation. Children who are physically active, they often exhibit improved attention spans and better impulse control. So, in the classroom, we're very, very lucky actually, because we have an fully outdoor classroom, and then we have 3 classrooms in the setting, and 2 of them basically spill garden. So if we're finding that there's a lot of energy in the classroom, we'll just be totally child-led, and we will take them out into the garden, and we'll find those movement breaks, and we'll get them moving in the garden. And it's a great way of just bringing those energy levels back down, and having a real sense of fun and play. And one of the things that we also find is really important for us basically is, that link between the parents and that responsibility for a partnership with them. So there are a number of activities then that we would organise in our Montessori here, which actually promotes the benefits of physical movement and gets the parents involved. So just a typical example of that might be, we might run an activity where we're working with the children on the post office. And so we make postcards and design stamps of our own. And then we tell the children that the big outcome from this is that we're going to organise a walk to the village, to the post office. And so in order to do that, we get the parents involved. So there's that lovely partnership where we walk to the village with the children, and we post our letters, and then the children get to see the letters arriving in their post boxes the next day. So it's like a start, a beginning, a finish, an end, all of that to that activity, and it involves the parents as well. Sports day, you know, we get the parents in for that. There's a number of activities that we do that we try to actually involve them in, and we notice that when the children are physically active, they're far more inquisitive. And they're far more socially interacting between each other. And, you know, we like to promote that strong mind-body connection with the children. Okay, so I'm going to go on to the third slide there, Katrina. By the way, all of these images are images from our own settings. So I kind of felt that it would be easier to talk about things that obviously I'm familiar with, and the type of activities that we provide for the children. And, you know, we are obviously child-led, but there's an element of guiding them towards, you know, things that help, with their social skills, with their conflict resolution, all of that type of thing. But it is predominantly child-led. We just provide the resources and the materials. You know, like typically, as I said, there are outside classroom. So in the morning, when we're getting ready, myself and the team behind the scenes there, what we would do is we might just leave a lot of like loose play, resources, you know, cardboard boxes and things like that in our outdoor classroom. And so then they arrive in, and it's just really, really interesting to see what they do with those resources. And we don't have a plan. We like to see where that takes us, and it kind of links with STEM and all of that, and everything that we're doing is kind of all linked, if you get me. So it's about their overall well-being as well. You know, we have a saying here, we have a warm weather and a cold weather saying, and so basically we'll say to the parents and to the children that in cold weather we have warm layers, waterproofs and Wellingtons, and in the fine weather we have sun hats and sun creams, and that basically allows us then to cater for anything, wherever the day takes us, whatever the activity is. You know, the children are prepared, and that's great. And so pedagogically, we like to you know, be sure then that the weather is not an issue, and that the children and the weather, you know, whatever they want to do, whether it's not down to it being weather permitting. We never say it has to be weather permitting. The only thing that ever stops an activity here, any kind of physical activity, would be high winds. Rain and snow, doesn't matter, they actually love it. So we'll go on to the next slide, which I hope you're seeing there is our adventurous play zone. So this would be the one that Dr. Orlagh spoke about a few minutes ago, the risky play area. So a while back, we decided that we were actually going to have a shift in the narrative in relation to this area here. And if you're looking at that slide now, I can't see it because of my technical glitch here, but I think you should be looking at the slide with the teepee and the children, and the rocks and the pool, So this area here is by far the most favorite part of the Montessori everyday. This is where they kind of congregate, it's where they chat, it's where they plan, it's where all the activities happen. And it does tend to be very boy-led, but we do have a lot of girls who get involved in it, but typically the girls might be more inclined to actually, and it's just the way it pans out, it's not anything that we do or whatever. They might decide to go and gather flowers and drop them in the puddles, whereas the boys typically will dig and will carry stones. Here we are, I think this is the one that you can see. So this is our adventurous play zone. We changed it from risky play to our adventurous play zone. And this area, just developed very organically. You know, they use this area, we allow them kind of just free rein at it, and they develop fine and gross motor skills. So they're always carrying, digging, pouring, picking up, collecting, doing all of that. And just to the right of that area, there's a big tall bank, and we've actually connected 2 ropes to that, which they actually physically climb up and down on that rope. So in this area, it's fantastic for developing things like, you know, their risk perception, learning how to assess and understand risk and to gauge their own abilities. And it's really, really amazing and fantastic to see them, you know, from the start of their journey with us to the end of their journey with us, when they'll come to me and they'll say, Sharon, I can't do that. And I'll say, oh, you know, just keep trying. You will be able to. You know, just keep trying. I know you can do it. And to see them come running up the garden one day and go, Sharon, I can do it now. It's brilliant. I can do it. And so they develop really quickly, and they learn how to make informed choices. You know, their decision-making skills get better and better throughout the year. It's a really fantastic area to help them build their resilience. You know, like all through, you know, I've just finished my master's, all through my study and research and everything, you know, this thing about resilience keeps coming up. And, you know, there's no hard and fast way to teach resilience. You can't. So you've got to provide the tools and the opportunities for the children to develop that resilience themselves, and for them to learn how to bounce back from setbacks. So if they do something and it all falls down and they're disappointed that it all falls down, it's how they cope with that and bounce back from that. So they're learning that. They're learning how to manage their emotions. You know, they're being physically active in this zone and throughout the garden. And, you know, they're going to be fearful when they climb on the jungle gym. They're going to be very fearful when they try to climb up that rope and they get stuck halfway and they can't go up or down. It's fear, but it's just learning how to manage that fear. That's such a really great thing. Working together, helping each other, negotiating and communicating with each other is huge. And then when they're faced with any challenges or disagreements, how they actually do that. So just the next screen there, please. Okay, so Dr. Orlagh there talked about you know, any type of physical movement. So we like to use all the resources that we have. You know, it doesn't have to be an expensive resource. It can be cardboard, paper. It can be things as simple as bubbles. The children in this age group, in all age groups, we found love bubbles, and they will not stand still if you give out a set of bubbles and they're all running around the garden blowing bubbles. They're clapping, they're pointing, they're trying to catch, they're jumping in the air to get them. It's just one of the amazing resources that are cheap and available, and you know, it gets them moving and they don't even think about it. Sand, the sand pit. I mean, a couple of bags of sand, you fill your sand pit, make sure you have a cover for it, but you know, filling it, like, so then they're weighing, they're lifting, they've got that sensation. It's a sensorial, tactorial resource as well. They can feel it coming through their fingers. They share, they pass it round, they chat, they talk, they communicate. Water play, again, fantastic. The children love it. We do it in the summer, we do it in the winter because actually, you know, we wouldn't set up that type of thing, but actually what we do in the winter is they have every day their waterproofs, their Wellingtons, they'll stand under a leaky gutter, they'll jump in puddles, they'll run through the grass, they'll play in the mud. So it doesn't really matter. We're not restricted at all by the weather. They all have their sets of waterproofs, they all have their Wellingtons and their warm layers, and nothing stops them from moving around every day. So according to Stewart 2021, the deliberate creation of an environment that promotes physical activity can have a positive impact on preschool children's well-being and on their school readiness. So all of those skills that I've just mentioned and that Orlagh mentioned before, all really, really help children to be ready for school, and to give them the best possible start to their formal education. Next slide. Okay, again, this is, you know, another example of just the resources and how we use our resources, So multiple uses for the exact same resource. So, you know, a set of ribbons. So when the children have those ribbons in their hand and they run around the garden, they're trailing them behind them. The others are running, trying to catch them. They're moving their arms up and down, sideways. That's just a fantastic way to get them moving. And then we hang them in the trees, and it's just a very sensorial thing for them as well. And they run in and out, and they're trying to tip them and jump, and the wind catches them and they're trying to catch them. So it's really just another way for them to be really physical in a very, very fun way. Using music as well. So we bring the, the portable speaker down, what do you call it, and, we'll do dancing, and we'll try and coordinate our dance to the wind or to the music, hopscotch, things like that in the garden as well, what do you call it, and a lot of the activities in this preschool, like in the preschool setting, can have like other learning outcomes. So, being so physically active, they're obviously fine-tuning their gross and fine motor skills, their problem solving, like we said, observational skills. So they're always like on the move, looking, they're being environmentally aware, what do you call it, maths and science concepts, weight, distance, all of those type of things, teamwork, their vocabulary, they're constantly expanding their vocabulary when they're moving around, and their numeracy skills, like when they're playing hopscotch, they're reinforcing those numbers 1 to 10 continuously. Storytelling, as Dr. Orlagh mentioned there a few minutes ago, a great way to get them physically active, using their imagination. And all of the resources that we have there, like the sand, the water, are textures, and they're sensorial, and they can use them for exploring. And here you can see in the picture as well, when the weather is really warm, we love when they take their shoes off. So we encourage them to take their shoes off and to feel nature and to feel the grass, and to just, for that sense of well-being, it's just fantastic. Next slide, thank you. So there, as I mentioned, the sensorial and the messy play. So again, you can see like we use their bare feet, whether it's in the grass, they can feel that, what do you call it, obviously if they move onto a path and the path is harder, they feel that through their senses, and then just providing resources for them where they can extend that type of play. So paint, free painting with their feet, they absolutely love that, and it's squishy and it's wet and it's cold and all of that, so that also helps them. And it's to provide those resources, as Dr. Orlagh said, to just get the children moving, what do you call it, having fun, because children move, that's what they do. They run, they skip, they jump, they carry, they pour, wave, walk, roll, whatever, what do you call it, and to keep encouraging them to just come out of their comfort zone, taking off their shoes, doing all of those kind of activities. And you can see there, that's our big chalkboard. We have that in our outside classroom. And that supports mark making, and it gets them, they've to bend to pick the water up, they've to paint on the wall, what do you call it, and again, it's just a really nice form of physical activity for them there as well. Next slide, thank you. So as I said there a few minutes ago, like, it's like providing the resources for them to be physically active, to move, and to also recognize the other learning outcomes that you can kind of tie into that for them, like supporting their number recognition, like the science and the maths-based stuff that they will learn from, the weighing, the carrying, the pouring, all of those kind of things. The parachute, I know Dr. Fiona mentioned that before, that's really great, what do you call it, and they can run in and out and go under it and be physically active with that. It's to give them those opportunities, and being physically active plays that crucial role in their cognitive development, because we can see without a shadow of a doubt that it improves their concentration, their problem solving skills, and their academic performance. And tying it in again with ASHTUR, what do you call it, and the National Curriculum Framework, which have those 4 themes of well-being, identity and belonging, communications, and exploring and thinking. A preschool program that is packed with physical activities supports child's development in each of these areas. And just being being active is so much fun. And because we have, and we're really, really lucky, you can see there kind of slightly into the background, our outdoor classroom, what do you call it? You know, if they want to have a rest, they can go and have a rest. If they don't feel physically active today because they may be tired or whatever, they have that classroom. And in that classroom, then it's a lot of resources that are, again, honed towards that physical activity. There's bigger, larger building blocks than they would typically find in an indoor classroom, the big outdoor marking board and stuff like that. And I think the important thing to remember, which we all know in this particularly exciting part of a child's life, is that they're always learning, always learning. And that was the one thing that struck me when I ventured into this career path way back in 2009. I remember the one thing that I took from my early Montessori course was that children at this age group learn unconsciously. So you don't have to, it's not rote learning. They don't have to feel like they're being made to learn. If we provide those fun activities, those physical things, the resources and the right environment, the children can learn without even realizing they're doing it. I think that's pretty much all I have for you today. These are the references. Here are some more pictures from the setting where you can see physical activity is really a huge part of what we do here in Cedar every day. Running, skipping, jumping, egg races, again, finding those resources that are easy and that the children will love. So thank you very much for listening to me, and I feel very privileged to have accompanied Orlagh this evening. It was a pleasure.
Thank you very much, Sharon. That was absolutely brilliant. And it's unbelievable that a little bottle of bubbles can bring so much to the physical activity scene, isn't it, when you actually think about it?
Yeah,
the amount of engagement that they get, and as Dr. Orlagh was talking about those fundamental skills, you can see them all over the place when you just think about them chasing those bubbles all over the place. Yeah. Lovely, lovely. We have a couple of questions that just sort of came in there, ladies. So I'm just conscious that we're sort of short on time here, so we'll run through a few of them very quickly, if that's okay. How would you encourage, Orlagh, this is for you, sorry. How would you encourage young girls to participate more in sports and PE in school? If they don't have an interest, like.
Right, thank you. That's a good question. I suppose really like the main thing is understanding like who they are and what they want. I think you need to know every group of, whether it's your class or whether it's, a team, everyone's different. So I think it's like understanding what interests them and making it relevant to their lives as well. And I think just ask them, like sometimes it's as simple as just ask them, what do they enjoy? What don't they enjoy? Trial and error and get them involved. Something that I kind of found from my own research, particularly for girls, but also applicable to boys, is that they feel valued when they're contributing. So I'm not saying that they have to come up with the whole physical activity session, but when they, when you ask them, oh, what would you like to do or do you enjoy this? They feel more valued. And then as a result, they feel more motivated. It links to their motivation. So I think by actually like garnering their interest and seeing, okay, what do they actually really like? And then like it's very simple, then do more of what they actually like, because at the end of the day it's fun and it's a feel good atmosphere. If they leave after that 20-minute session or after that activity and they're smiling, I think you've your job done then essentially. So really to answer the question is get to know the children that you are working with, get to know what they like, what they dislike, and do more of what they like. And it's trial and error. You're never going to get it right, but just trial and error and get them involved. Don't be afraid to ask them and allow them to contribute as well.
Brilliant. Thank you very much. Sharon, what about yourself? Do you ever find that some of the young lassies in the school don't want to engage as much as the little fellas, maybe?
Yeah, sometimes, but then I can't honestly say, to be honest with you, that there's that massive shift, because I suppose this early on, they're kind of like the girls like have like they've got their prams and their buggies and things like that, and typically they do tend to gravitate towards those type of things. But they give as good as they get with the boys now in terms of the bikes and the scooters and the climbing frames and stuff like that. So yeah, they're pretty good at it.
Good. Glad to hear it. Can you give some examples maybe of physical activity, how it can be used to support inclusion?
Me?
Sorry, I have either of you, anybody jump in, either of you. I just threw that one out there just for good measure, like, you know.
Yeah, no worries. Well, like if in our setting, you know, the resources, the materials, like they're available to everybody. The games and the areas that they play in are the resources are, as I said, available. What to call it? So they like teamwork, and they carry. I think it's just providing them with opportunities and resources, and just not overly planning things, and not just stepping in if you need to, but just leaving them to kind of like organize things and sort things out for themselves, and to be aware, as Dr. Orlagh said there, of what the children like, knowing them and knowing what they like, and just having those things available to them. Because if you try to force things, that tends to, you have them sitting out or not wanting to do things. So it's being more led by them, and just providing those resources, I find anyway, with us, is what works best.
I think, Orla, you touched on this earlier as well, where you were saying like adapting things to suit the children's needs.
Absolutely. And it could be just something simple, by just the language that you use, depending on their ability, I guess, and their motivation as well. It could be something like changing the rules of a game or an activity. It could be the equipment, and it could be bigger or smaller balls, depending on sensory issues, etc. Um, Timings of activities, and just simply like the language and that you use as well, or music. Like there are numerous ways that you can, but like I think the main thing is meeting the needs. It's hard to please everyone, and it's a hard job, but like it is your job essentially to meet the needs of everyone. So you do really need to just get to know what they like, and play around with it.
Very good, very good. I see just another question just popped up there, folks. We'll maybe just take this last one, and then any ones that aren't answered, we'll answer them sort of when we send out the certificate and so on. But any ideas for structured physical activities for indoor, say 3 and 4 year olds? Orla, do you want to jump in?
Yeah, I think the main thing is like, any opportunity that you get. So for example, things like, I know the storytelling that I had mentioned in my slides, like, any opportunity like that, rather than them sitting down, with the limited space as well, bearing in mind in the safety as well, but like getting them to act out characters, and things like animal yoga, whereby you mightn't need a lot of space either, and it's not very strenuous activity. And even like the movement breaks, and just getting the heart rate going as much as possible, really. But getting them to use their imagination, I think, particularly for the younger age cohort. I know it might be different at primary school level, um, where you can't really move tables and things like that. But like, even just things like balancing, having challenges, having daily movement breaks, as Sharon was saying as well, with the space that you have. I mean, you just have to trial and error those things. But what I do really, really like, and what I do found that's very beneficial, is integrating the storytelling, and music as well, with like movement and dance. That it's not like they're chasing, and that there's safety issues in indoor, particularly using the space, and music and storytelling is always a nice one there.
And Sharon, you might want to add to this, but I'm going to link a little question in here that I see popping up there about particularly if a child had autism, providing that sort of indoor activity and inclusion for a child maybe that has autism. What do you think?
Yeah, like Dr. Orlagh said there, we're huge fans of music. And you can use that in a lot of ways. You can use it to raise the heart rate and to get them very physically active. You can equally use it to calm them and to have less impactful movement, but it's still movement. And in relation to children with autism, we like to provide a lot of sensorial stuff. So there's a lot of music, there's a lot of light. We try to get them moving to the light. So we have sequenced lights that we use that actually works with the beat of the music. And we find that works really, really well for the water play. So setting up the water station inside, and whilst it's not high impact moving, it's still getting them to move those, develop those fine motor skills, and then carrying items from A to B and C and stuff like that is all part of movement and supporting that for them.
And you had mentioned the sensory and the sensorial activities as well early, so that's something that would be very beneficial for autistic children too.
Hugely beneficial,
yeah. Yeah, lovely. Listen, ladies, we're going to have to call it a night, I'm afraid. There are a few questions in there that we sort of haven't got round to, but we will get answers for those for you and get them sent out as well. Thank you everybody for participating. Thank you, Dr. Orlagh Farmer. Lovely to have you here. And Sharon, as always, delighted to see you. And I told you I'd keep you in work after you were finished your masters, didn't I?
You did. You did.
Thank you so much, everyone. Thank you.
Thank you, folks.
Thanks, Orlagh. Thanks, Marguerite.
Good night, everybody. Good night.
Night.